So today we're going to talk about the 5 steps you need to take when ICE or another enforcement agency comes knocking at your door. Hello, welcome to Workplace Wake Up. I'm Jen Shaw. Every week I spend about 15 minutes covering key legal developments, introducing you to interesting guests, and providing some entertainment to start your workday. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. We have a lot to talk about. Many of you have called me recently about what is going on with immigration. And I know that there is just a ton of uncertainty. It's not clear what is happening on the federal level. It's not clear what immigration, customs, and enforcement folks, what their goals are. They tell us what their goals are, but it's just not clear. So what I want to talk about today is a very specific plan for what you can do when ICE comes knocking, okay? And it may be ICE, it may be the immigration and customs enforcement folks, it may be public law enforcement like your police department in your local jurisdiction. It could be some other regulator like the Department of Labor or your local wage and hour folks. Anyway, they're all talking to each other. And so anytime you get a visit from ICE or another regulator of some sort, this is what I want you to do. Okay, multi-step approach, 5 steps, okay? First thing, I want you to call your lawyers immediately. If you have listened to this podcast for a while, or if you have worked with me, you know that I am not all about calling your lawyer. I like to empower you to understand what your rights and obligations are and to be able to handle things on your own. I don't need you to call me for every issue. We have a ton of wonderful clients. We're plenty busy. I want to empower you to be able to do what you need to do. That said, right now, in the environment that we are in with respect to immigration, you have got to be aggressive about your defense. And not only the defense of you, but the defense of your employees. How to protect what's going on your work site. So you got to call your lawyer. Now, you should know who that lawyer is in advance. Okay, and I know this sounds obvious, but if you're in a high-touch industry like agriculture or the garment industry, something hospitality where immigration is likely to come, you need to have your lawyer on speed dial, okay? And it needs to be an employment lawyer and or an immigration lawyer. Your corporate lawyer is generally not going to know what you need to do. Again, I'm not advocating having, a huge legal services budget here, but you just have to have a connection, a contact with someone who you can call. And one of the things to understand about immigration law is it is a very unique area of practice. I know for many of you, you might think of employment law as covering everything relating to the workplace. Well, there's a difference between employment law and labor law, for example. Labor law is more about unionizing, union organizing. How do you deal with a union once they come into your workplace? How do you keep the union out? Employment law is really focused on wage hour, equal employment opportunity, handbooks, policies, procedures, that sort of thing. Immigration is a carve-out of employment law. Just like labor law is, just like benefits law when you're talking about benefit plans or tax issues that relate to benefits you're providing, those are all carve-outs. I want you to understand that because when you have an attorney, you need to have an attorney who's going to understand immigration. Now, we're an employment law firm, but we work with a lot of employers on immigration. So we can help our clients on that. Unless it becomes a very detailed, complex situation, then I am the first one to call the immigration lawyers. I love a guy named Chris Thomas at Hogan and Hart in Denver. He's amazing, and we use him all the time. So you got to know who you're calling. Okay, that's step 1. Step 2, you want to make sure that you are alerting your HR representatives, the manager at each location, if you have more than one, and designated contacts who should be receiving this knowledge, this information that ICE or another agency has come. So what you want to think about is Who are your points of contact? You want to assign a trained individual. It should be an HR manager or legal counsel who's going to be absolutely front and center in terms of the interactions with ICE, and they're going to maintain and ensure compliance at each work site. You should also assign an alternate contact in case, for whatever reason, that initial contact is not going to be available, okay? Now, when I tell you you're going to call your lawyer, remember that what I'm saying is you tell the ICE contact, the person who is talking to you, our company policy is to call our lawyer, and I'm doing that now. Okay, you can be very calm and cool about that. Same thing with the HR rep and the contacts. Our company policy is that I need to notify the manager at each location. I'm doing that now. Okay? So that is step 2. You're going to first call your lawyer. And of course, you've got to tell the person from ICE or whatever agency it is that you're doing that. Then you're going to alert your HR reps, your location managers, your designated contacts, and again, letting the ICE rep know that. Number 3, you're going to politely ask to see any warrant, okay? You want to make sure you understand that there are 3 different types of enforcement activities that ICE can engage in. One is what we call knock and talk. This is where an agent shows up to ask questions about your business or specific employee. Again, you're going to immediately contact your legal counsel and give that lawyer the opportunity to engage in a telephonic conversation with the ICE agent, okay? The second type of contact is what we call NOI, Notice of Inspection. This is where the agent will give you the NOI. It's a piece of paper. You're going to accept service of the NOI, and you're going to immediately forward it to company counsel. Now, you should also request business cards from each agent and offer to introduce them to your counsel. You should also say that pursuant to your company policy, you are not permitted to answer any substantive questions, okay? The third activity is the big one, worksite enforcement action, or what we call a raid. A raid occurs when numerous agents show up at your worksite, generally unannounced. They're going to have either an administrative or a judicial warrant. You want to get a copy of that warrant and you want to take a picture of it, okay, so that you know exactly what you've got. When there is a raid, there are very specific things that you need to do, okay? But what I want you to think about initially is step 1, 2, and 3 is, remember, you're calling your lawyer. Step 2, you're alerting your HR reps, your location manager, and your designated contacts. Step 3 is if you're in a position where they are on site, you're going to ask if they have a warrant. Remember, if you have an NOI, it's a piece of paper, you're going to take it and you're going to have time to respond. If it's just a knock and talk, understand that they're going to make it seem very casual, but they're going to come back most likely. And it will either come back in the form of an NOI or they're going to come back to do a raid, okay? Now, what do I want you to do at the point when you've got someone there on site? Okay, first of all, let's do some do's and don'ts. Do stay calm and courteous, okay? Do be polite. If they request you to shut down production, do that. That's fine. Make sure you get the names and the business cards of all of the agents. Make sure, as I said earlier, that you offer to introduce them to your legal counsel. Here are the things I do not want you to do. These are the things you should not do. Do not answer any substantive questions. Do not volunteer any information. Do not give them access to any restricted non-public area unless they have a judicial warrant from a court. Not an administrative warrant from ICE, but a judicial warrant from a court. Don't turn any documents, information, or property over to the agents unless your counsel instructs you to do that. Back to a few things I want you to do. Number 1, if the agents are walking around your facility, make sure you follow them. Write down as clearly as you can everything they're saying, anything they take, or anything they seize. Make sure that if anybody is removed, any team member or employee is removed, make sure that you know their identity, that you write it down, you've got it well documented. And then, of course, don't block the agent's activity. Make sure you're not interfering with what they're doing. Now, there are a number of things that I want you to think about in terms of these sorts of enforcement activities. First of all, remember that immigration officers have a right to enter any public areas of your workspace, okay? But they have to have a valid judicial search warrant to proceed to any restricted areas. That means you need to mark areas as restricted, okay? Employees only, non-public. Now, a valid judicial warrant is signed and dated by a judge. It's going to have a time frame within which the search can be conducted, a description of the premises to be searched, and a list of items to be searched for and seized. Things like payroll records, employee identification records, I-9 forms, Social Security Administration correspondence, etc. The agent is going to serve the warrant on either the receptionist or a company representative, and then they're going to say, okay, I've served the warrant. Now the other agents are allowed to come in. You can accept the warrant but not consent to the search, okay? That's an option. If you don't consent to the search is still going to proceed, but you can later challenge it if there's grounds to do so. So it's a good idea to say, listen, I understand that you're going to go ahead with this search, but I'm not consenting to it. As I mentioned earlier, depending on the type of business you have, ICE may demand that your equipment be shut down and that no one leave the premises without permission. That's fine. The ICE folks can move your employees into a contained area for questioning. Some agents may question employees while others are going to execute the search and seizure of the items that are listed in the warrant. Now, you have a lot of rights and responsibilities in this area. Remember, as I mentioned earlier, if there is a search warrant, you want to make sure it's signed by a court and that the search is happening during that permitted time frame and that it's within the scope of the warrant. Take a picture of the warrant, send it to your attorney. Don't forget to write down the name of the supervising ICE agent and the U.S. attorney who is assigned to the case. They have to give you that information. Make sure you have one company representative following them around the facility. You can videotape, you can take notes, and even if ICE doesn't agree to give you documents, you can get them later. If the warrant says they have access to locked facilities, you need to give them access to the locked facilities. If an agent insists on taking something that is vital to your operation, explain that and ask for permission to photocopy it instead of letting them take the original. Usually, if you're being reasonable and appropriate, they're going to grant that request. As I mentioned earlier, don't block or interfere with their activities in public areas, but don't give them access to non-public areas if they do not have a valid search warrant. If they're looking at something that's not covered in that judicial warrant, object to it. You're not going to engage in a debate or argument. You're just going to say, listen, this area is not listed in the warrant, so I'm objecting to it. They're going to do what they're going to do, but make sure that you state your objection. If they want to look at documents that are attorney-client privileged, like a letter from your lawyer, request that they not look at those documents until you have contacted your counsel. If they still insist on taking them, you cannot prevent them from doing so, but do your best to record what documents they took because you can object to it later. You are going to ask for a list of the items that were seized during the search. They're required to provide that to you. Remember, you don't want anybody to give a statement to the ICE agents or allow anyone to be interrogated by ICE or any of the other agencies before consulting with your lawyer. If they ask to talk to employees, you can tell them that they can choose whether or not to talk with ICE, but you can't direct them not to do so. Don't hide employees. Don't smuggle them out of the workplace. Don't provide any false or misleading information. Don't say that an employee isn't there who is. You have to be very, very transparent and straightforward. However, don't forget about the health and welfare of your employees. Sometimes enforcement actions can last for hours. If they need medication, if they need food, if they need water, or kids need to be picked up from school, please let the ICE agents know about that, and they will usually be reasonable. Now, remember that your employees have the right to remain silent. They have the right to an attorney. You can ask if your employees are free to leave. If the ICE agent says they are not free to leave, then they have a right to a lawyer. Don't instruct your employees not to talk to ICE, as I said, but you can tell them they have the right to remain silent and they do not need to answer any questions. If ICE tries to determine your employee's immigration status by, for example, saying, okay, everybody who has a green card, stand over here. Everybody who has a passport or citizenship, stand over here. They don't have to move. They don't have to join a particular group. They also don't have to show identity documents that disclose their country of nationality or their citizenship. Obviously, if your employees are detained or taken into custody, make sure their families are contacted and that any money owed is paid to them. Now, remember that the investigation does not end after ICE or the other agencies leave the premises. ICE and the U.S. Attorney will review any items seized during the raid. They may conduct undercover surveillance for many months. There's a lot of things that are going to be going on, so you're going to want to be very in touch with your counsel during that time, okay? And remember, finally, you're going to want to create an action plan that you post in the workplace so everybody understands what the expectations are, all right? I know we went over a little bit today, you guys, but I wanted you to have a thorough plan and understanding of what you should do when ICE comes knocking, all right? So try not to worry. Knowledge is power. You've got some knowledge now. Remember that you just have to make contacts with the lawyers you want to use and the other representatives in your organization before this happens, before you have anybody who is on site. So that's a really good thing to do today. After you listen to this podcast, make sure you get going and you initiate those connections. Everyone, thanks so much for joining me. Have a great rest of your day. Workplace Wake Up, including our guests and hosts, do not provide legal advice in this podcast. Do not act upon any of the information discussed in this podcast without first consulting a licensed attorney in your jurisdiction. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to spread the word, please share it with others. Post about it on social media and/or rate and review it. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, and email us at info@shawlawgroup.com.